The rain hammered against the windshield of Jenna's beat-up Honda Civic as she pulled into the driveway of the 2-story colonial house in suburban Cleveland. The wipers squeaked with each pass, a sound that perfectly matched the grinding feeling in her stomach. The October storm had been relentless all day, turning the autumn leaves into a soggy carpet across the perfectly manicured lawn. Even the weather seemed to be mocking her situation. 3 months ago, she'd been living in her own apartment in downtown Columbus, working as a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized tech company called Innovate Tech Solutions. 3 months ago, she'd had her life figured out, or at least she'd thought she did. She'd been planning to ask for a promotion, maybe even start looking for a bigger apartment closer to the trendy Short North district. She'd had a savings account with enough money for a vacation, a 401k that was actually growing, and a 5-year plan that included buying her own condo. All of that had evaporated on a Tuesday morning in July when her manager, Derek, had called her into the conference room with that look on his face, the one that said, "This conversation is going to ruin your day." The tech industry had taken a downturn, venture capital was drying up, and Innovate Tech had lost 2 major clients in the span of a week. The layoffs were swift and brutal. 15 people out of a company of 60, including Jenna and most of the marketing department. Now, at 26, she was moving back in with family, specifically her cousins Marcus and Tiffany Walsh, who'd graciously offered their spare room when Jenna's world came crashing down. The company layoffs had hit without warning. One day she was planning campaigns for software launches. The next, she was cleaning out her desk with a cardboard box and a 2-week severance package that barely covered her car payment. The front door opened before she could even turn off the engine. Marcus emerged, his perfectly styled hair somehow immune to the October drizzle. At 32, he'd always been the successful one in the family. Real estate agent, luxury car in the driveway, house in the suburbs, the whole American dream package. Behind him came Tiffany, 29, blonde highlights catching the porch light, her yoga pants and oversized sweater screaming, "I don't need to work because my husband provides." "Jenna!" Tiffany's voice carried that particular pitch of manufactured enthusiasm. "You made it. We were starting to worry with this weather." Jenna killed the engine and took a deep breath. The familiar scent of her car, a mixture of the vanilla, air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror and the faint smell of the coffee she'd spilled last week, felt comforting. In a few minutes, she'd be stepping into someone else's space, living by someone else's rules, sleeping in someone else's bed. "Thanks for letting me crash here," Jenna said as she stepped out, immediately feeling the cold rain seep through her jacket. "I know it's not ideal." "Don't be ridiculous," Marcus interrupted, already grabbing one of her suitcases from the trunk. "Family helps family. That's what we do." The house smelled like vanilla candles and expensive laundry detergent, that artificial scent of prosperity that you could buy at any high-end home goods store. Everything was pristine. White walls adorned with perfectly arranged family photos, beige furniture that looked like it had never been sat on, and not a single item out of place. It was the kind of house featured in home design magazines, the kind that made you wonder if actual humans lived there, or if it was just a showpiece for entertaining. Marcus had always been obsessed with appearances. Even as kids, he'd been the one to organize his toys by color and size, the one who'd throw a tantrum if someone messed up his perfectly arranged baseball card collection. Now, at 32, that obsession had evolved into this, a house that looked like a model home, a wardrobe full of expensive suits, and a luxury car that he treated like a museum piece. "So this is your room," Tiffany said, leading Jenna up the thickly carpeted stairs. Every step was muffled, as if the house itself was trying to suppress any signs of real life. The guest room was small but comfortable, with a double bed covered in hotel-quality white linens, a cherry wood dresser that probably cost more than Jenna's monthly rent used to be, and a desk pushed against the window that overlooked the backyard's professionally landscaped garden. "Feel free to make it your own," Tiffany continued, her voice carrying that particular tone that suggested the opposite. We cleared out some closet space for you, and there are fresh towels in the bathroom down the hall. Jenna set down her laptop bag carefully. Inside was her most prized possession, a MacBook Pro she'd saved up for months to buy, loaded with her portfolio, her life's work, and every application she'd submitted in the past 3 months. Next to it in the bag was a small jewelry box, containing her mother's engagement ring and a pair of pearl earrings, the only valuable things her mom had left her when cancer took her 5 years ago. "The bathroom's just down the hall," Marcus said, appearing in the doorway. "We usually eat dinner around 7, but don't feel like you have to join us every night. We know you're probably going to be busy with job hunting and all." There it was, the subtle reminder that this was temporary, that she was the family member who'd failed to keep her life together. Jenna forced a smile. "I really appreciate this, guys. I promise I won't be here long. I've got a couple of promising leads, and once I get back on my feet—" "Take your time," Tiffany said quickly. "No rush at all." But Jenna caught the look that passed between her cousins, a quick glance that lasted maybe half a second but spoke volumes. She'd seen that look before, growing up. It was the look adults gave each other when discussing the family member who couldn't quite get it together, the one who always needed help, the one who was more burden than blessing, after they left her. Alone, Jenna sat on the edge of the bed and looked around the room. The walls were bare except for a generic landscape print, the kind of artwork you'd find in a budget hotel. She opened her suitcase and began unpacking, hanging her interview clothes in the closet, arranging her toiletries on the dresser. From her laptop bag, she carefully removed a framed photo of her and her mother, taken just 2 months before the diagnosis that would change everything. They were both laughing, arms around each other at the Columbus Arts Festival, surrounded by colorful vendor booths and the sound of live music. Her mom looked so alive, so vibrant, her dark hair catching the sunlight as she threw her head back in genuine laughter. It was impossible to believe that within 2 years, stage 4 pancreatic cancer would steal her away, leaving Jenna completely alone in the world. Margaret Walsh had been more than just a mother. She'd been Jenna's best friend, her career advisor, her emotional anchor. She'd worked 2 jobs to put Jenna through college, never complaining about the long hours or the sacrifices. She'd been the one to celebrate every promotion, every success, every milestone in Jenna's young career. When the cancer came, Jenna had moved back home to help with treatments, driving her mom to chemotherapy appointments and holding her hand through the worst of it. The medical bills had wiped out both of their savings accounts. Even with insurance, the experimental treatments and specialized care had cost more than either of them had ever imagined possible. After her mother died, Jenna had been left with nothing but debt, grief, and a few precious keepsakes that represented a lifetime of love and memories. Jenna placed the photo on the nightstand with reverent care and pulled out her jewelry box, small wooden container that had belonged to her grandmother before passing to her mother. She opened it slowly, running her finger over the engagement ring that represented 3 generations of love stories. Her grandmother had worn it for 53 years until arthritis made it too painful to keep on. Her mother had worn it for 22 years, until cancer treatments made her fingers too swollen. The ring itself was modest, a small round diamond in a simple gold setting that had been all her father could afford when he'd proposed at 23. But it represented something priceless, a love that had lasted through poverty and prosperity, through sickness and health, through all the challenges that life could throw at a marriage. Her parents had been one of those rare couples who genuinely liked each other as much as they'd loved each other, who'd held hands while watching TV even after 20 years of marriage. Next to the ring were her mother's pearl earrings, a graduation gift from her own mother when she'd finished nursing school. They were small, simple pearls, but they'd been her mother's favorite accessory. She'd worn them to every important occasion: Jenna's high school graduation, her college graduation, her first job interview. "Pearls give you confidence," she'd always said. "They remind you that something beautiful can come from irritation and pressure." A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Jenna?" Tiffany's voice carried through the door. "Dinner's ready if you're hungry." The dining room table was set for 3, complete with cloth napkins and wine glasses. Marcus was opening a bottle of red wine, while Tiffany set down a casserole dish filled with what looked like chicken and rice. "So tell us about these job prospects," Marcus said as he poured the wine. "Anything solid?" Jenna took a sip of wine. It was good, probably expensive. "I've got a second interview with a company in Chicago next Friday, marketing director position. The pay would be about 30% more than I was making before. Chicago's expensive, though," Tiffany pointed out. "Rent's probably double what you were paying in Columbus." "Still a net gain," Jenna replied. "Plus, it's a growth opportunity. The company's expanding, and they're looking for someone to build out their entire marketing department." Marcus nodded approvingly. "That's the kind of position that can really set you up. Build your own team, make your own decisions. Much better than being a cog in someone else's machine." The conversation flowed easily after that. They talked about the weather, about Marcus's latest real estate deals, about Tiffany's book club. For a moment, Jenna almost forgot about the awkwardness of her situation. These were her cousins, her family. They'd grown up together, spent countless holidays and summer vacations together. Marcus had taught her how to ride a bike. Tiffany had helped her get ready for her first high school dance. "Oh, that reminds me," Marcus said as they cleared the dishes. "We're going to be out of town this weekend. Tiffany's sister is getting married in Michigan, and we're driving up Friday morning." "That's fine," Jenna said. "I'll probably spend most of the weekend preparing for the Chicago interview. Anyway." "Perfect," Tiffany said. "The house will be nice and quiet for you to focus." Later that night, Jenna lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling. The house made different sounds than her old apartment, the furnace kicking on, the floors settling, the neighbor's dog barking at something in the distance. She picked up her phone and scrolled through job listings, but her eyes were too tired to focus on the descriptions. Tomorrow she'd continue the grind, sending out applications, following up on leads, trying to convince strangers that she was worth hiring despite being unemployed for 3 months. It was exhausting, demoralizing work. But she had to believe that something would break her way soon. The Chicago interview was promising. The hiring manager had seemed genuinely interested in her experience, and the company's growth trajectory was impressive. She thought about her mother's ring, sitting in its box on the dresser. Her mom had worn it every day until the chemotherapy made her fingers too swollen. Even then, she'd kept it on her nightstand, touching it sometimes when she thought no one was looking. "Don't settle," Jenna whispered to the darkness, repeating her mother's words like a mantra. She wouldn't settle for staying here longer than necessary. She wouldn't settle for a job that didn't challenge her. And she definitely wouldn't settle for being the family charity case. She was going to get back on her feet, no matter what it took. Friday morning came with the kind of crisp October air that made Cleveland feel like a postcard. Jenna stood in the driveway at 6 a.m., watching Marcus load their weekend bags into his pride and joy, a gleaming black BMW 5 Series that he'd bought 6 months ago and talked about constantly. The car was his baby, detailed weekly, parked in the garage every night like it was made of gold. "You sure you'll be okay here by yourself?" Tiffany asked for the 3rd time, adjusting her oversized sunglasses despite the early hour. Jenna hefted her laptop bag higher on her shoulder. Her train to Chicago left in 2 hours, and she was cutting it close, but she wanted to see them off first. "I'll be fine. The house will probably be cleaner when you get back than when you left." Marcus hit the remote start on the BMW, and it purred to life with the kind of low rumble that cost extra. "We should be back Sunday evening, maybe Monday morning if we decide to stay an extra night. Tiff's family parties can get pretty wild." "Take your time," Jenna said. "I'll probably be a nervous wreck until this interview anyway. Having the place to myself will be good." She watched them pull out of the driveway, Marcus giving the BMW a little extra gas just to hear the engine growl. It was such a Marcus thing to do, always having to show off, always needing people to notice his success. Jenna shook her head and smiled. Some things never changed. The train ride to Chicago gave her 3 hours to review her portfolio and practice answers to potential interview questions. The marketing director position was perfect, exactly the kind of role that could launch her career to the next level. The company, a startup that had developed software for small business accounting, was growing fast and needed someone to build their marketing presence from the ground up. Tell me about a time you had to overcome a significant professional challenge, she practiced quietly, watching the Ohio countryside roll past the window. She'd prepared several answers, but she found herself thinking about the past 3 months. Losing her job had been devastating, but it had also taught her resilience. She'd learned to network, to hustle, to believe in herself, even when rejection. Letters piled up in her inbox. The interview took place in a converted warehouse space in Chicago's River North District. The company's offices were all exposed brick and modern furniture, the kind of place that screamed innovative startup. Jenna felt a surge of excitement as she walked through the space. This was where she belonged, not in some corporate tower, but in a place where she could make a real impact. Sarah Chen, the CEO, was younger than Jenna had expected, probably early 30s, with sharp eyes and the kind of confidence that came from building something from nothing. "Your portfolio is impressive," she said, as they sat in a conference room overlooking the Chicago River. "Especially the campaign you did for the software launch in Columbus. The metrics are outstanding." "Thank you," Jenna replied. "That campaign was special because we were working with a limited budget but unlimited creativity. Sometimes constraints force you to think differently." They talked for 2 hours. Sarah walked her through the company's growth plans, the challenges they were facing, the kind of person they needed to lead their marketing efforts. It was exactly the conversation Jenna had been hoping for. Detailed, strategic, focused on results rather than just experience. "I have to be honest," Sarah said as they wrapped up. "We're moving fast on this position. We've interviewed several candidates, and we're hoping to make a decision by Monday. But I want you to know that this conversation has been exactly what I was hoping for." Jenna's heart raced. "I appreciate that feedback. This role is exactly what I've been looking for. The chance to build something from the ground up, to really make an impact." "I'll be in touch soon," Sarah promised as they shook hands. The train ride back to Cleveland felt different. Jenna stared out the window at the same countryside, but now it looked like possibility instead of defeat. She'd nailed the interview. She could feel it. By Monday, she might have a job offer. By the end of the month, she might be living in Chicago, starting a new chapter of her life. She got back to Marcus and Tiffany's house around 8 p.m., exhausted but energized. The house was dark and quiet, exactly as she'd left it. She flipped on the lights and headed straight upstairs to her room, eager to kick off her heels and change into comfortable clothes. But something was wrong. The room looked different, emptier. More than empty, it looked violated. Her dresser top, which had been cluttered with her toiletries, makeup, hair products, and the small decorative items that made a space feel like home, was completely clear. Not just organized, but bare. The desk where she'd left some papers, her portfolio materials, and a small stack of books she'd been reading was stripped clean, as if someone had taken a giant eraser to her entire existence. Jenna's heart started, pounding, a rhythm so loud she could hear it in her ears. She rushed to the closet and threw open the doors with such force that they banged against the walls. Empty hangers swayed gently on the rod, mocking her with their slow, hypnotic movement. Her clothes, every single piece of clothing she owned, from her professional blazers to her favorite weekend jeans to the vintage band t-shirts she'd collected over the years, were gone. "No, no, no," she whispered, her voice cracking as she spun around the room like a woman possessed. She rushed to the dresser and yanked open the drawers one by one, each empty space hitting her like a physical blow. Her underwear, her socks, her pajamas, her workout clothes, everything had been removed with surgical precision. She searched frantically for her suitcases, her duffel bags, anything that might contain her belongings. Maybe they'd packed everything up for her, assuming she wasn't coming back. Maybe this was some kind of misunderstanding that could be easily resolved with a phone call and a few apologies. But as she searched, the horrible truth began to dawn on her. This wasn't packing. This was erasure. She spun around, looking for her suitcases, her laptop bag, anything that belonged to her. The room had been stripped clean. Even the photo of her and her mother was gone from the nightstand. With shaking hands that could barely hold the phone steady, she called Marcus. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, then went straight to voicemail. His voice, cheerful and professional, invited her to leave a message for Marcus Walsh, licensed real estate professional. The normalcy of it, the complete disconnect from the crisis she was experiencing, made her want to scream. She tried Tiffany next. Same result. Straight to voicemail after a few rings, as if the call had been deliberately declined. Tiffany's voicemail message was even more grating, all bubbly enthusiasm about yoga classes and book club meetings and living your best life. Jenna ran downstairs, checking every room with increasingly desperate energy. The living room, the kitchen, the dining room, all exactly as they'd been when she left, not a single sign that her belongings had ever existed in this house. It was as if she'd been completely erased from their lives in the span of 36 hours. In the garage, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. There were boxes stacked along one wall, boxes that hadn't been there when she left, but they were taped shut, with writing on them in Marcus's distinctive handwriting. Her hands trembled as she grabbed a box cutter from Marcus's meticulously organized workbench and sliced through the tape on the nearest box. Inside were clothes, but not hers. These belonged to someone else, with tags still attached, expensive brands that neither she nor Tiffany typically wore. Designer jeans that probably cost $300, sweaters with luxury labels, shoes that looked like they'd never been worn. The second box contained electronics, tablets still in their packaging, a gaming system, various gadgets and accessories. All new, all expensive, all items that Marcus and Tiffany definitely hadn't owned before this weekend. The realization hit her like a freight train carrying a cargo of pure betrayal. They'd sold her stuff. While she was in Chicago, sitting in that conference room, talking about her future and trying to rebuild her career, her own cousins had gone through her room like vultures picking over a carcass. They'd taken every single thing she owned and sold it to strangers, then used the money to buy themselves a weekend shopping spree. The violation was so complete, so thorough, that she couldn't even process it at first. It wasn't just theft, it was a systematic erasure of her existence. They'd eliminated every trace of her from their house, as if she'd never lived there at all, as if 3 months of her life could be simply deleted and replaced with new purchases. She tried calling them again, pacing the garage like a caged animal. Marcus's phone rang once before going to voicemail, as if he'd seen her name and declined the call. The casual cruelty of it, the fact that he was actively avoiding her calls while she discovered what they'd done, made her see red. Rage flooded through her body, hot and consuming and more intense than anything she'd ever felt. It started in her chest and spread outward like poison, making her hands shake and her vision blur. For a moment she wanted to destroy something, to scream, to break every perfect thing in their perfect house. But underneath the rage was something even more painful, a grief so deep it felt like drowning. These were her cousins, her family, the people who were supposed to help her when she was down, not kick her while she was already on the ground. They'd grown up together, shared Christmas mornings and family vacations. Marcus had taught her how to ride a bike in the driveway of their grandmother's house. Tiffany had helped her pick out a dress for her first high school dance, had braided her hair and told her she was beautiful when she felt awkward and insecure. Her hands shook as she unzipped it. The laptop was there, thank God. But when she opened the small pocket where she kept her jewelry box, her heart stopped. It was gone. Her mother's ring, the pearl earrings, everything. They'd taken the only physical connection she had left to her mother and sold it to strangers. The sound that came out of Jenna's throat was somewhere between a sob and a scream. She sank to the floor of the empty closet, clutching her laptop to her chest, and let the tears come. Not just tears of anger, but of betrayal so deep, it felt like a physical wound. These were her cousins, her family, the people who were supposed to help her when she was down, not kick her while she was already on the ground. Her phone buzzed with an incoming text. A message from Marcus. "Hope interview went well. See you Sunday night." The casual tone, the complete lack of acknowledgement of what they'd done, the way he was pretending everything was normal while her entire life had been stripped away. It made her want to throw the phone across the room and watch it shatter against the pristine white walls. But instead, she screenshot the message, her hands steadying as purpose began to replace despair. If Marcus and Tiffany thought they could steal from her and get away with it, if they thought they could treat her like some disposable charity case who would just disappear quietly, they were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. They'd picked the wrong person to victimize. They'd underestimated the granddaughter of a woman who'd worked 3 jobs to support her family during the Depression, the daughter of a woman who'd fought cancer with grace and determination until her very last breath. Jenna wiped her tears with the back of her hand and opened her laptop. She had work to do, and she was going to approach this with the same methodical precision that had made her successful in marketing. She would document everything, build an airtight case, and make sure that Marcus and Tiffany faced consequences for what they'd done. She started by taking photographs of everything. The empty room from multiple angles, the timestamp on her phone showing when she'd returned, the boxes of new merchandise in the garage with Marcus's handwriting clearly visible. She photographed the empty hangers, the bare dresser top, the cleared-out desk. Every image was dated and geotagged, creating an irrefutable record of the theft. Then she began the painstaking process of documenting what had been stolen. She accessed her cloud storage and pulled up every receipt, every purchase record, every insurance document she'd carefully saved over the years. Her mother had taught her to keep meticulous financial records, a habit that had seemed tedious at the time, but was now proving invaluable. Jenna didn't sleep that night. She sat cross-legged on the bare mattress in the empty room, her laptop, balanced on her knees, and researched. Ohio theft laws, small claims court procedures, property rights. She read until her eyes burned and her neck ached, but she kept going. Every statute, every case precedent, every filing requirement, she absorbed it all with the focus of someone who had nothing left to lose. At 3 a.m., she made a comprehensive list in her laptop notes app, organizing everything with the systematic approach that had made her successful in project management. Evidence collected. Photos of empty room, time-stamped and geotagged. Photos of new merchandise in garage with Marcus's handwriting. Screenshot of Marcus's casual text showing consciousness of guilt video. Walkthrough of stripped room, need to create. Bank records showing purchases of stolen items, need to obtain through legal discovery. Receipts for major purchases stored in cloud, laptop, jewelry, clothes. Photos of items with serial numbers, laptop, electronics, camera equipment, insurance appraisal documents for jewelry, stored in cloud, credit card statements showing clothing purchases over past 2 years, estimated values. MacBook Pro 2022 $2,500 mother's engagement ring, appraised. 2,200 pearl earrings, appraised. 1,300 professional wardrobe, 15 pieces. 2,800 casual clothing and accessories. 1,200 electronics, camera, tablet, headphones. 800 books and personal items. 200 total estimated loss. 11,000 next steps. File police report for theft and conversion. Serve formal demand letter through attorney. Gather additional purchase receipts from cloud storage research. Ohio theft and conversion laws. Document estimated value of stolen property with supporting evidence research. Similar cases for legal precedent. Find attorney specializing in theft conversion cases. Legal Research Priorities. Ohio. Revised Code 29113. Theft and fraud. Small claims versus common pleas court jurisdiction. Conversion law and willful versus inadvertent taking asset seizure procedures for judgment enforcement. Attorney fee recovery in theft cases. By Sunrise. She had a battle plan. The Cleveland Police Department's 3rd District Station was a study in institutional beige. Beige walls, beige linoleum floors, beige metal desks that looked like they'd been purchased sometime during the Carter administration. The whole place smelled like coffee that had been brewing too long, industrial disinfectant, and the particular odor of human frustration that accumulated in places where people came to report that their lives had been turned upside down. Officer Patricia Rodriguez, a woman in her 40s with kind brown eyes and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd heard every possible story of human betrayal, listened patiently as Jenna explained what had happened. She took notes in a small spiral notebook, occasionally asking clarifying questions that demonstrated she was actually paying attention. A small mercy in what had been a week full of people who seemed determined to minimize her experience. So, you were living with your cousins temporarily due to financial hardship, and while you were out of town for approximately 36 hours on a job interview, they removed all your personal property from the house and sold it, Rodriguez clarified, typing notes on her computer with the steady rhythm of someone who'd done this thousands of times before. They didn't just remove it, Jenna said, her voice steady despite the anger still burning in her chest like a slow-acting poison. They sold it. I have photos of new merchandise in their garage, expensive electronics, designer clothes, luxury items they bought with money from selling my belongings. They treated my room like a storage unit they could liquidate for quick cash. Rodriguez reviewed the photos on Jenna's phone, her expression growing more serious with each image. She'd clearly seen her share of family disputes, but this seemed to strike her as particularly egregious. Do you have proof of ownership for the stolen items? That's usually where these cases fall apart. People can't demonstrate that the property actually belonged to them. Jenna pulled up her cloud storage on her phone, navigating to the carefully organized folders she'd maintained for years. Everything. I have receipts for my laptop and all my electronics, photos of my jewelry with the insurance appraisal documentation, credit card statements showing when and where I bought my clothes, even photos of myself wearing the jewelry at family events. My mother taught me to keep detailed financial records after she had to deal with insurance companies during her cancer treatment. Smart, Rodriguez said approvingly, scrolling through the documentation with the practiced eye of someone who knew the difference between a solid case and wishful thinking. A lot of theft cases fall apart because people can't prove ownership, especially in family situations where there's often shared property or disputed gifts. This level of documentation is unusual and extremely helpful. She filed the report under multiple charges: theft, conversion, and criminal mischief. The detective assigned to your case will be Detective Maria Santos from our Financial Crimes Unit, she said, handing Jenna a case number written on a small card. She specializes in cases involving conversion of property and has a good track record with family disputes that cross into criminal territory. She'll be in touch within 48 hours to schedule a formal interview. Rodriguez leaned back in her chair, her expression softening slightly. Can I give you some unofficial advice? In my experience with these kinds of cases, the family relationship often makes people hesitant to pursue full legal remedies. They worry about holidays, about what other relatives will think, about burning bridges. But what your cousins did wasn't a family dispute. It was theft. Plain and simple. Don't let them use your relationship to escape consequences for criminal behavior. In the meantime, she continued, I'd strongly recommend you find somewhere else to stay. Even though they're family, the relationship has clearly broken down, and returning to their house could put you in a vulnerable position, or potentially compromise the criminal case if they claim you had access to take back your own property. Jenna had already thought of that. Her friend Katie from college lived in Cleveland Heights, in a small apartment above a vintage bookstore, and had immediately offered her couch when she'd called in tears the night before. Katie worked as a freelance graphic designer and kept irregular hours, so she wouldn't mind having company. It wasn't ideal. Sleeping on a couch at 26 felt like a step backward, but it was better than staying in a house with people who'd proven they couldn't be trusted with her basic security and dignity. From Katie's cozy apartment, surrounded by bookshelves and the comforting smell of old paper and Katie's ever-present lavender candles, Jenna called a lawyer. Actually, she called 12 lawyers before finding one who would take a case against her own family. The legal profession, it seemed, was surprisingly squeamish about family disputes, even when those disputes involved clear criminal behavior. Most of the attorneys hung up when she explained the situation, muttering about family matters and civil disputes. A few lectured her about the importance of family relationships and suggested mediation instead of litigation. One actually laughed when she described the theft, saying something about spoiled millennials and first world problems before ending the call abruptly. But David Kim, a solo practitioner who specialized in small claims and civil disputes from a small office above a Korean restaurant in downtown Cleveland, listened to her story with genuine interest and growing indignation. His office was cramped but organized, with law books stacked floor to ceiling and client files arranged in meticulous order. Despite the modest setting, Kim had a reputation for taking on cases that larger firms wouldn't touch and winning them, through preparation and persistence. "The good news is you have excellent documentation," he said during their phone consultation, his voice carrying the slight accent of someone who'd immigrated as a child, but had spent decades mastering the intricacies of American law. "The bad news is that small claims court in Ohio caps damages at $5,000. Given your estimated losses of $11,000, if you want full recovery, you'll need to file in common pleas court, which is more expensive, takes longer, and requires more extensive legal procedures." Jenna had spent Saturday morning with a calculator and her laptop, going through every receipt and document, calculating the replacement value of everything they'd stolen. Her laptop alone was worth $2,500. She'd bought the high-end model because her freelance work required professional-grade software and processing power. The jewelry, based on the insurance appraisal she'd had done after her mother's death, was worth $3,500. Her professional wardrobe, carefully assembled over 3 years of working in corporate environments, represented another $2,800. Add in her casual clothes, electronics, books, and personal items, and the total came to just over $11,000. "So we file in common pleas court," she said. "That means you're looking at filing fees, service fees, potentially a longer legal process," Kim warned. "And there's always the chance they'll claim the items were abandoned property or that you gave them permission to sell your things." "They can claim whatever they want," Jenna said. "I have photos of the empty room, their text messages acting like nothing happened, and a paper trail proving ownership. Plus, I was only gone for 36 hours. How is that abandonment?" Kim was quiet for a moment. "Okay, here's what we'll do. We'll start with a demand letter. Official notice that they need to return your property or pay fair market value within 10 days. If they ignore it or refuse, we file suit. My fee is $200 an hour, but for a case this straightforward, we're probably looking at 10 to 15 hours total." It was money Jenna didn't have, but she'd figure it out. She'd put it on a credit card if she had to. Some things were worth going into debt for, and justice was one of them. The demand letter was a masterpiece of legal precision and barely controlled fury. Kim had a gift for translating raw emotion into cold, clinical language that somehow made the violations seem even more egregious. He laid out the facts with surgical precision, attached copies of all the evidence, and demanded either immediate return of the stolen property or payment of $10,800 in documented damages within 10 business days. "We're also going to include interest, court costs, and attorney fees in the final demand," Kim explained as they reviewed the letter together in his cramped office. The afternoon sun streamed through dusty windows, illuminating legal documents and case files stacked on every available surface. Ohio law allows recovery of attorney fees in theft cases if you can prove willful conversion, meaning they knew the property belonged to someone else and took it anyway for their own benefit. Jenna loved that phrase, willful conversion. It sounded so much more serious and criminal than "my cousin sold my stuff." It carried the weight of legal consequence, the promise that actions would have real-world ramifications beyond hurt feelings and family drama. "What's our likelihood of success?" she asked, studying the formal letterhead and legal language that transformed her personal nightmare into an official legal matter. Kim leaned back in his chair, which squeaked in protest. "Given your documentation and the evidence of their spending, spree immediately after the theft, I'd say we're looking at better than 90% chance of victory in court. The challenge won't be proving they did it. The Facebook Marketplace listings alone are enough for that. The challenge will be collecting the judgment if they don't have readily available assets." "What do you mean?" "Well, if they spent the money from selling your stuff and don't have savings to cover the judgment, we'll need to seize assets. That could mean garnishing wages, levying bank accounts, or taking physical property like vehicles. It's legal, but it can be time-consuming and expensive." Jenna thought about Marcus's BMW, about the way he'd lovingly detailed it every weekend, about how he'd bragged about the monthly payments he could barely afford. What kind of physical property? Kim smiled, and for a moment, his professional demeanor cracked to reveal something that looked remarkably like satisfaction. Cars are often the easiest assets to seize. They're registered with the state, they can't be hidden easily, and they retain enough value to satisfy most judgments. Plus, people tend to take the loss of their vehicle very seriously. It often motivates quick settlement negotiations. They served the letter on Monday morning through a professional process server, a grizzled ex-cop named Murphy, who specialized in difficult deliveries and took particular satisfaction in catching people who tried to avoid service. Marcus signed for it at his real estate office at exactly 10:47 a.m., according to the certified mail receipt and Murphy's detailed service report. The image of Marcus's face when he realized what he was signing for, captured in Murphy's matter-of-fact description, gave Jenna a small surge of satisfaction. By Monday afternoon, her phone was ringing with such urgency that she could almost hear the panic vibrating through the cellular towers. "Jenna, what the hell is this?" Marcus's voice was angry, but she could hear something else underneath. The high-pitched undertone of someone who'd just realized their casual cruelty was about to have serious consequences. "It's a demand letter," she said calmly, sitting in Katie's living room with her laptop open to a document titled Legal Strategy Notes, and a cup of tea that had gone cold while she'd been researching Ohio civil procedure rules. Pretty self-explanatory, really. "You're suing us? Your own family? Over some clothes and jewelry?" The casual dismissal of her mother's ring as some jewelry made Jenna's grip tighten on the phone. "You stole from me. Your own family. And it wasn't some clothes and jewelry. It was everything I owned in the world. We didn't steal anything." Tiffany's voice came through the phone, tinny and defensive. They had her on speaker. "We cleaned out the room because we thought you'd moved out. You left for Chicago and didn't say when you'd be back. We thought you'd found a job and just abandoned your stuff here." Jenna laughed, a sound with no humor in it whatsoever. "I was gone for 36 hours for a job interview. 36 hours, Tiffany. I left Friday morning and came back Friday night. You knew exactly where I was, why I was there, and when I'd be back because we talked about it at dinner Thursday night. Well, your stuff was just sitting there taking up space." "My stuff was in the room you gave me to live in," Jenna interrupted, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "The room where I'd been living for 2 months. The room where I kept all my belongings because you invited me to stay there when I needed help. The room that you told me to make my own." Marcus jumped back in. "Look, we can work this out. We don't need lawyers involved. We're family. You should have thought about that before you sold my mother's jewelry." The silence on the other end was deafening. "We can pay you back," Tiffany said finally, her voice smaller now. $10,800, Jenna said. "That's what my property was worth, plus interest and legal fees." "That's ridiculous," Marcus snapped. Your clothes weren't worth $4,000. Half that stuff came from Target. It was exactly the wrong thing to say. Jenna felt her composure crack slightly. You want to itemize it, Marcus? Let's talk about my mother's engagement ring that you sold to some pawn shop. What's that worth? To you? Because to me, it was priceless. Another long silence. We have 10 days to respond to your lawyer, Marcus said finally. We'll be in touch. The line went dead. Tuesday morning brought the call Jenna had been hoping for. Sarah Chen from the Chicago company. Jenna, I'm calling with good news. We'd like to offer you the marketing director position. For a moment, Jenna forgot about everything else. The theft, the legal battle, the betrayal. This was what she'd been working toward for months. That's incredible news. Thank you so much. They talked details, salary, benefits, start date. The offer was even better than she'd hoped. $75,000 a year, plus equity, plus a signing bonus to help with relocation expenses. I'll need to give you an answer by Thursday, Sarah said. Is that enough time? Absolutely, Jenna replied. I just need to handle a few things here in Cleveland first. After hanging up, Jenna stared at her laptop screen. She could take the job, move to Chicago, and put this whole mess behind her. It was the smart play, the mature response. Walk away, start fresh, let her cousins keep whatever they'd gained from selling her stuff. But every time she thought about her mother's ring, in some stranger's jewelry box, anger flared in her chest. Some things couldn't be walked away from. Some betrayals demanded consequences. She called David Kim. They offered to pay me back, she told him, but I want to proceed with the lawsuit anyway. Even if they make you whole financially? Jenna thought about the casual way Marcus had dismissed the value of her belongings, the way they'd tried to gaslight her into thinking she'd somehow abandoned her property. They need to learn that actions have consequences, and I want it on the public. Record what they did. All right, Kim said, but there's something else we should discuss. In cases like this, Ohio law allows you to seek additional damages beyond just the value of the stolen property. We can go after their car. Jenna sat up straighter. What do you mean? If we can prove willful conversion, and your evidence suggests, the court can order seizure of assets to satisfy the judgment. They can take property, garnish wages, or levy bank accounts. A car is often the easiest asset to seize because it's registered and can't be hidden. Marcus's BMW, his pride and joy. The car he'd spent 6 months bragging about. The car he detailed. Every weekend, the car he'd used to show off just hours before stealing from her. Tell me more about that, Jenna said. The courtroom in the Cuyahoga County Common Pleas building was smaller than Jenna had expected, more like a conference room than the dramatic setting she'd seen in legal dramas. Judge Patricia Hendricks, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, reviewed the case file while the parties arranged themselves at the plaintiff and defendant tables. Marcus and Tiffany had hired their own lawyer, Robert Fletcher, an expensive-looking man in a 3-piece suit who kept checking his Rolex. They sat rigidly at the defendant table, Marcus in his best suit, Tiffany in a conservative dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. They hadn't spoken to Jenna, or even looked in her direction. This is case number CV 2024-1847, Walsh versus Walsh & Walsh, Judge Hendricks announced. Plaintiff is seeking damages for alleged theft and conversion of personal property. Mr. Kim, you may present your opening statement. David Kim stood up, and Jenna felt a surge of confidence. Over the past 3 weeks, he'd become more than just her lawyer. He'd become her advocate, someone who understood that this case was about more than money. Your Honor, this is a straightforward case of theft and willful conversion, Kim began. On October 15th, while Ms. Walsh was out of state for a job interview, the defendants unlawfully removed all of her personal property from the room she occupied in their home and sold these items for their own financial gain. We will present clear evidence of ownership, photographic documentation of the theft, and proof that the defendants used the proceeds to purchase luxury goods for themselves. Fletcher rose for the defense opening. Your Honor, this is a family dispute being weaponized through the legal system. My clients generously provided housing for Ms. Walsh during her period of unemployment. When she left for Chicago without clear indication of her return, they reasonably believed she had abandoned the property. They disposed of what they believed to be abandoned items and used the modest proceeds to offset the costs of housing and feeding Ms. Walsh for 2 months. Jenna felt her jaw clench. Abandoned property, modest proceeds. The audacity was breathtaking. Kim presented the evidence methodically. Photos of the empty room, time-stamped. Purchase receipts for every major item, pulled from Jenna's cloud storage. The insurance appraisal for her mother's jewelry. Bank records showing Marcus and Tiffany's spending spree the weekend they'd sold her belongings. Your Honor, I'd like to draw your attention to Exhibit J, Kim said, holding up a printout. This is a bank statement showing a cash deposit of $4,600 into the defendant's joint account on October 16th, the day after they removed Ms. Walsh's property. The same day, they made purchases totaling nearly $3,000 at various retail locations. Judge Hendricks studied the documents. Mr. Fletcher, how do your clients explain this cash deposit? Fletcher whispered with his clients before answering. Your Honor, my clients occasionally sell items through various online platforms. This deposit could represent any number of legitimate sales. Of what items? The judge pressed. I'd need to consult with my clients about the specific. Your Honor, Kim interrupted. We have screenshots of listings from their Facebook Marketplace account, posted on October 16th, selling items that match the description of Ms. Walsh's stolen property. Fletcher looked genuinely surprised. He clearly hadn't known about the Facebook listings. Marcus and Tiffany were whispering urgently to each other, both looking pale. Kim presented the screenshots. Photos of Jenna's laptop, her jewelry, even some of her clothes, posted for sale with prices that totaled exactly $4,600. The defendants not only stole Ms. Walsh's property, Kim continued, but they were careless enough to post evidence of their theft on social media. These listings were posted while Ms. Walsh was traveling back from Chicago, before she'd even discovered the theft. Judge Hendricks looked over at the defendant table. Mr. Fletcher, I'm going to need an explanation for these Facebook listings. Fletcher requested a brief recess to consult with his clients. Jenna watched them huddle in the hallway outside the courtroom, Marcus gesticulating angrily, while Tiffany dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. When they returned, Fletcher looked like a man who'd just been told he was representing the Titanic. Your Honor, my clients acknowledged that they may have acted hastily in disposing of Ms. Walsh's property. They're prepared to offer full restitution for any documented losses. Too little, too late, Kim responded. Ms. Walsh offered them the opportunity to return her property or provide restitution through our demand letter. They ignored it. Ohio law is clear that willful conversion allows for additional damages beyond mere restitution. Judge Hendricks nodded. I'm prepared to rule on this matter. The evidence clearly shows that defendants knowingly removed and sold property belonging to the plaintiff. The Facebook listings demonstrate this was not a case of mistaken abandonment, but willful conversion for financial gain. Jenna felt her heart racing. This was it. I find in favor of the plaintiff in the amount of $10,800, representing the fair market value of the converted property. Additionally, I award attorney fees in the amount of $3,000 and court costs of $500. Total judgment, $14,300. Marcus made a strangled sound. Tiffany put her head in her hands, but Judge Hendricks wasn't finished. Furthermore, given the willful nature of this conversion and the defendant's initial refusal to provide restitution, I'm ordering immediate asset seizure to satisfy this judgment. Mr. Kim, do you have a specific asset in mind? Kim smiled. Yes, Your Honor. We request seizure of the 2024 BMW 5 Series registered to defendant Marcus Walsh. VIN number. He read off the vehicle identification number they'd obtained from public records. So ordered, Judge Hendricks said, banging her gavel. The court authorizes the sheriff's department to seize said vehicle and conduct a public auction to satisfy the judgment. The color drained completely from Marcus's face. Your Honor, that car is worth $40,000. The judgment is only $14,000. Then you'll receive the difference after auction costs and fees, the judge replied. Court is adjourned. 3 days later, Jenna stood in the driveway of her cousin's house, holding the keys to Marcus's BMW. The sheriff's auction had been swift and efficient. The car had sold for $38,000. After paying off her judgment, court costs, and auction fees, there was still about $20,000 left over that would go back to Marcus and Tiffany. But that wasn't what mattered to Jenna. What mattered was the look on Marcus's face when the sheriff's deputy had handed her the keys. David Kim had been right. In Ohio, the winning bidder at a sheriff's auction could be the judgment creditor themselves. Jenna had used her signing bonus from the Chicago job to bid on the car. She'd gotten it for $14,000, exactly the amount of her judgment. The BMW was beautiful, she had to admit. Black leather interior, all the high-end features Marcus had bragged about. It even still had that new car smell. She adjusted the driver's seat and the mirrors, then started the engine. It purred like a contented cat, smooth and powerful. The GPS system lit up, and she programmed in her new address in Chicago. As she backed out of the driveway, she saw Tiffany watching from the front window. Their eyes met for a moment through the glass. Tiffany looked away first. Jenna drove slowly through the neighborhood, taking her time. She had boxes to pick up from Katie's apartment, and then she'd make the drive to Chicago to start her new life. But first, she wanted to savor this moment. Her phone rang through the car's Bluetooth system. Marcus's name appeared on the dashboard display. She almost declined the call, then decided to answer. What do you want, Marcus? His voice came through the premium speakers with crystal clarity. I want to know how you sleep at night. Jenna laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. Better than I have in months, actually. This car has really comfortable seats. You destroyed our family over some stuff, material possessions. I didn't destroy anything, Jenna replied, stopping at a red light. You destroyed it when you decided to steal from someone who trusted you. Someone who was already down and needed help. We were helping you. We gave you a place to live. And I was grateful. Right up until you sold my mother's jewelry to strangers. Jenna's voice hardened. That ring was the only thing I had left of her, Marcus. The only thing. And you pawned it like it was worthless junk. The silence stretched long enough that she wondered if he'd hung up. We didn't know, he said finally, his voice smaller. About your mom's ring. We thought it was just... We didn't know it was special. You didn't ask. That's the point. You went through my personal belongings like you were cleaning out a storage unit. You never considered that those things might matter to me. The light turned green. Jenna pressed the accelerator gently, feeling the BMW's smooth power. Even the way it shifted gears was perfect. Look, Marcus said, maybe we can work something out. You keep the car, but you give us back the difference from the auction. $20,000 is a lot of money to us. Jenna almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Marcus, do you know what I found out during the legal discovery process? What? Your house isn't paid off like you always claimed. You're 3 months behind on the mortgage. That BMW? You were leasing it, not buying it. The lease payment was $800 a month that you couldn't afford. Another long silence. How did you... Court-ordered financial disclosure. Your lawyer had to turn over your bank records. Jenna turned onto the highway entrance ramp. You were living beyond your means, getting deeper in debt every month. And when you saw an opportunity to make some quick cash by selling my stuff, you took it. That's not... It's exactly what happened. You saw someone more desperate than you and decided to take advantage. The only difference is, I fought back. She ended the call and turned up the radio. A classic rock station was playing Don't Stop Believin' by Journey. and she found herself singing along as Cleveland faded, in the rearview mirror. The drive to Chicago took 4 hours, and Jenna spent most of it thinking about the past few months. The job loss that had seemed like the end of the world, the humiliation of moving back in with family, the betrayal that had cut deeper than she'd thought possible. And now, somehow, she was driving toward a new life in a car that used to belong to the people who'd wronged her. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Chen. "Looking forward to having you on the team Monday. Your office is ready." Another text, this one from Katie. "Saw the news story about the court case. You're famous. So proud of you for standing up for yourself." News story? Jenna hadn't known there was media coverage. At the next rest stop, she pulled up the local Cleveland news website on her phone. There it was, a small item in the local section. "Woman wins unusual lawsuit against cousins who sold her belongings." The article was brief but accurate. It mentioned the theft, the court case, and the car seizure. The comments section was a mix of support and criticism, as internet comments always were. Some people thought she'd gone too far by suing family. Others applauded her for standing up to thieves, regardless of their relationship. One comment made her smile. Good for her. Family doesn't give you the right to steal. Actions have consequences. As she merged back onto the highway, Jenna thought about her mother. What would she have said about all this? Part of her would have been disappointed by the family drama, the public spectacle of a lawsuit. But Jenna thought her mom would have understood the deeper principle at stake. "Don't settle," she whispered to herself, repeating her mother's old advice. She hadn't settled for being a victim. She hadn't settled for letting the theft slide just to keep the peace. And she definitely hadn't settled for less than full justice. Her new apartment in Chicago was a studio in River North, walking distance from her office. Small but modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. As she carried her few remaining possessions up from the BMW, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months: excitement about the future. The apartment came furnished, so she didn't need much. Just her laptop, some clothes Katie had loaned, her, and a few personal items she'd managed to salvage. She'd have to rebuild almost everything: her wardrobe, her book collection, her household goods. But she had a good job now, a steady income, and a car that was paid for. She sat on the couch and opened her laptop to check her email. Mixed in with the usual spam and LinkedIn notifications was a message that made her heart stop. The subject line read, "Estate sale. Items of interest." It was from a woman named Carol Henderson in Cleveland. The message was brief. "I saw the news story about your court case and thought you should know. I bought some jewelry at an estate sale last weekend that might have belonged to you. There was a ring that matches the description in the article. I'd be happy to return it if you can prove ownership. No payment necessary. I believe in doing the right thing." Jenna's hands shook as she typed a response, attaching photos of her mother wearing the ring and the insurance appraisal documents. Within an hour, Carol had replied with photos. It was definitely her mother's ring. They arranged to meet the next day. Carol drove up from Cleveland and met Jenna at a coffee shop near her office. She was a woman in her 60s, a retired teacher who collected vintage jewelry as a hobby. "I go to estate sales most weekends," Carol explained as she handed over a small velvet box. "When I saw that news article and realized what had happened to you, I knew I had to try to find you. Nobody should lose their mother's ring that way." Jenna opened the box, and there it was. The small diamond solitaire in its simple gold setting, exactly as she remembered it. She slipped it onto her right ring finger. It fit perfectly, just as it always had. "How much do I owe you?" Jenna asked, reaching for her purse. Carol waved her away. "Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Sometimes good. Things happen to good people. And sometimes good people do good things. This is one of those times." After Carol left, Jenna sat in the coffee shop for a long time, looking at the ring on her finger. It caught the light from the window, casting tiny rainbows on the table. She thought about the chain of events that had led to this moment. The betrayal, the lawsuit, the car, and now this unexpected kindness from a stranger. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Tiffany. I wanted you to know that we found the pawn shop that bought your mom's ring. We gave them your contact info in case you wanted to buy it back. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I thought you should know." Jenna smiled and typed back, "Already. Got it back, but thank you for trying to make it right." Monday morning came bright and cold. Jenna dressed carefully in her best interview suit, one of the few professional outfits that had survived the theft, and walked the 6 blocks to her new office. The BMW was parked in a monthly garage near her apartment, but she wanted to walk. On her first day, she needed to feel the city, to ground herself in this new reality. The office was bustling with Monday morning energy. Sarah Chen met her in the lobby with a cup of coffee and a genuine smile. "Ready to change the world?" Sarah asked as they rode the elevator to the 7th floor. "More than ready," Jenna replied. Her office was small but had a window, a proper desk, and a bookshelf she could fill with the marketing texts she'd need to buy. On the desk was a welcome card signed by the entire team and a small plant, a succulent that would be hard to kill, according to the attached note. "We start with the team meeting at 9, Sarah said. "I'll introduce you to everyone and then we'll dive into the Q4 strategy session. Hope you're ready to hit the ground running." Jenna thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The job loss that had seemed like a disaster. The betrayal that had felt like the end of the world. The legal battle that had consumed weeks of her life. All of it had led here, to this office, this opportunity, this fresh start. "I've been ready for months," she said. That evening, after a successful first day filled with strategy sessions and introductions, Jenna drove the BMW through downtown Chicago. The city lights reflected off the car's polished surface as she headed home, and she found herself taking the long way, just to enjoy the drive. She passed Marcus and Tiffany's old house, on her mental map, not literally since they were 300 miles away, but metaphorically. She thought about them in their over-leveraged house, dealing with their mortgage problems, taking the bus to work now that their car was gone. Part of her felt sorry for them, but a larger part felt satisfied. They'd gambled that they could take advantage of someone they saw as weak and desperate. They'd lost that gamble, and the consequences were exactly what they deserved. At a red light, she looked at her mother's ring again. The diamond was small. Her father hadn't had much money when he'd proposed, but it was perfect. It represented a love story that had lasted until death, a commitment that had never wavered even through cancer and loss. "Don't settle," she said, aloud, watching the light turn green. She wouldn't settle for less than she deserved. She wouldn't settle for being treated badly by people who should have supported her. And she definitely wouldn't settle for letting injustice slide just to keep the peace. 3 months later, Jenna got a Christmas card from Carol Henderson, the woman who'd returned her mother's ring. Inside was a photo of Carol with her grandchildren, and a note. "Thought you'd like to know that your story inspired me to volunteer with a local legal aid clinic. Sometimes good deeds create more good deeds. Hope you're thriving in Chicago." Jenna was thriving. Her marketing campaigns for the ED company were exceeding all targets. She'd been featured in a trade publication as a rising star in B2B marketing. She'd even started dating someone, a software engineer named Michael who made her laugh and didn't mind that she drove a car with a complicated history. She'd furnished her apartment, rebuilt her wardrobe, and created a life that was better than anything she'd had before. The BMW had long since stopped feeling like Marcus's car and started feeling like hers. She'd had it detailed and had new floor mats installed that said JW instead of MW. On New Year's Eve, as she stood on her apartment balcony looking out over the Chicago skyline, Jenna reflected on the year that had changed everything. She'd started it unemployed and desperate, living with relatives who saw her as a burden. She was ending it with a career she loved, financial stability, and the quiet satisfaction that came from standing up for herself when it mattered most. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Happy New Year. I hope you're doing well. Marcus." She stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Some chapters of your life deserve to stay closed. At midnight, as fireworks exploded over Lake Michigan, Jenna made a resolution. She would never again let anyone make her feel small or powerless. She would never again settle for being treated as less than she was worth. And she would never forget that sometimes the best revenge was simply living well. The BMW keys sat on her kitchen counter, catching the light from the fireworks. Tomorrow she'd drive to the office in her car, work at her job, live her life. The life she'd fought for, the life she deserved. Justice, it turned out, wasn't just about winning in court. It was about refusing to let other people's bad choices define your future. It was about turning betrayal into strength, loss into opportunity, and endings into new beginnings. As the last firework faded from the sky, Jenna smiled and went inside to start the new year.